No, you can do this chair for first, since you're talking about roads. Okay.
She knows.
She will.
She asked me.
I know better than
she asked me to let her know. So.
I know better than volunteer my wife.
We've already talked about it. Yeah, she's already offered.
Okay, good.
She wants to sign for something. That's one thing. But
Yep.
I don't volunteer her for anything.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that's just Friday.
Yeah, that's cold.
Yeah.
That's Friday.
It was warm this morning.
So I need to get you guys some kits.
Yeah, you just bring them here
You want me to bring them like Friday?
No, I know.
Thursday.
You like Thursday?
Yeah. Yeah. That way everybody can come either Friday, Thursday night or Friday.
Yeah.
I want somebody to come in for skipping off.
I've seen it. I have.
Tell you what, I've got 6:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. Our workshop. And the first thing we've got tonight is the street repairs. It's something we started doing a few years ago, where we look at kind of the priority list, and something the council will take action on this in the near future. So, like I said, two things. We've got street repairs, kind of the priority list, and then looking at the future projects that Rampo, of course, they plan out, 20 years in advance. So I'm just going to turn it over to Ann, if you'd like to kind of walk us through this to get us started today.
Well, you all have my report. Basically, I was given about $400,000 to work with this year for street improvements. What my thought was is kind of going back to the discussion that we had about this time last year. It's much, much cheaper to keep our good streets good than to wait until they get to a point of deterioration where the only thing that we can do is complete rehabilitation. So my plan for this year is kind of a two-part plan. The first portion is applying preservative treatment to the subdivisions at Central Park, Elk Creek, Rock Spring, and Say Heights. These are all of our relatively new subdivisions that have asphalt streets. They are starting to show signs of wear, but the preservative treatment we can go ahead and apply, and that will just prolong that period before they need work. The one thing with this preservative treatment is they do recommend it's reapplied every 5 to 7 years. So, but it's $1. The price that we got was at like $1.03 a square yard. So it's fairly minimal, but it's still cost to the city. But if we can keep the oils in that asphalt, keep that asphalt pliable, that's going to last us quite a while.
Now, with 5 to 7 years, is that a plan that we can cover the entire town in 5 years and then go back and start just kind of doing a rotation? Is that kind of in the plans? Or?
Ideally, that would happen, but these subdivisions are really the only ones in the city that we can apply this treatment to, unless we keep building newer subdivisions in asphalt. The older subdivisions,
Too late.
We're too late on that, and they've already been, a lot of them have had slurry seals in the past, which is, it's tack oil, or it's oil that has like rocks embedded into it. Yeah. This preservative treatment is just an oil-based product. So unfortunately, you're really not going to see anything on the roads. but there's going to be a light dusting of sand on the roads, and that's all you're going to see. But they can put a piece of paper or something down so you can tell the difference where it's been and where it's not, but it's not going to be nice and black.
Sure.
But the other subdivisions is something that I've got kind of listed later as an option for you. We did have a slurry seal program 15 plus years ago, I'm told, where we did a portion of town every couple of years. I'm not sure if it was every year that we did some or if it was every couple of years, but we did have a slurry seal program in place, and that's something that I would like to see us bring back because it does make a big difference in costs and repair. As you've seen, I don't know if you guys remember this report that I gave out, but the Rejuvenator I had was $1.25 per square yard. The high density mineral bond, which is a product that Annandale's has, and it's what makes your streets black again. It's got that nice kind of pretty, it makes them look new. That's about $2.50. They both have a similar lifespan. A slurry seal is $6 a square yard, and that's got a 7 to 10 year lifespan. Overlays about $18 a square yard, and then a full reconstruction I've got at about $100 a square yard. So there's a huge difference between the two.
Okay.
And we also have to do something to take care of our streets that have failed and that are in very poor condition.
Right.
But that's where I need your direction, is that kind of balancing act.
And so with this overlay product, if we in the future needed to do an overlay or a slurry seal on top of this product, would this product preclude us from having those options?
No.
Okay.
And generally, when you do an overlay on streets, it's a mill and overlay, so you mill a portion of that surface and then you come in on top.
Okay.
But all this product is doing is putting the oils back into the asphalt.
Did I hear you correctly? Did you say once you do a slurry seal, you can't put this product on those roads?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a lot of these products that are just for kind of virgin asphalt. Once you start doing other treatments, like the slurry, it changes the top, it puts a new wearing surface on.
Yeah.
And so this is different than that. So it doesn't infiltrate that wearing surface, that slurry seal, like it would.
This should actually prevent us from needing to slurry seal them, though, if we do this every 5 years on these 4 editions.
Yes.
That's the purpose of the product.
That's the intent. Even talking with the material suppliers, they still do say, because if you look kind of at the plan, you can say, well, if I do this every 5 to 7 years, I should never have to reconstruct the road. Well, they're telling you you're still going to have to reconstruct it, but you're just delaying that inevitability. So you're buying yourself some time. And I'm not familiar enough with kind of the way things work to know, if we can keep this up, are we buying ourselves 50 years? Are we buying ourselves 25 years? Because the asphalt generally lasts about 20 to 25 years, and I'm not sure. I know that this will push that down the road, but
you don't know how long
I don't
we're
know
able
how
to
long.
perpetuate that.
Right. And ideally, if you keep these in good condition, you should never really have to, but with the drainage and other stuff, it wears the asphalt down too. So, you do the best that you can, and then maybe we can just get by with patchwork. But that's beyond my crystal ball. So.
Well, my only concern is that of your plan, your proposal that I saw here, and I did go through it quite a bit, went around to the city and looked at all the different areas. So I think that it's all right stuff. My only concern is that we're not reconstructing any of the roads that need reconstruction. And I wish we could find a way to do some of that. I know you can't do it all, so we got to pick and choose. And I agree that we got to maintain these roads and do what we can to keep from incurring costs, deteriorating roads.
And if you're going to pick from anything that I've got, I would almost say we have to do the curb repair and asphalt patch, because those are pieces of road that have drastically failed, gotten a lot of comments and calls on those, and those are patches that we can't do as staff. So that's, if we're going to do anything, we need to do the curb repair and asphalt patch. If we push the preservative treatment another year or two down the road, at some point, some of these subdivisions like Central Park, it's getting old enough that our ability to put the preservative treatment on is going to get less and less, and you're going to need something more like a seal coat. So what's your, it's kind of, you guys need to talk about your priorities. And
Well, just knowing that, though, if you got that, like you said, Central Park is the one. Did I hear you?
Central Park's the oldest,
Okay.
and then Elk Creek would be the next oldest.
Okay, so if you said maybe you pick Central Park and do the seal in Central Park and then save that money to maybe reconstruct, I don't know if there's enough money there to make that, to do both of those or not. And then next year, go pick the next neighborhood we need
Right.
to pick.
And I'm estimating that Batten's going to take about 390 to 400,000, and that's you can't. I would really highly advise doing part of it. You want to do the whole thing if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So
I just point out, I appreciate seeing where we've got the proposed all the way out to 2023, where we can put our priorities down there and with the pricing here. The fact that we were able to spend what we spent last year on road repairs and what we're able to spend this year on road repairs, I'm with Councilmember Benaj. Yeah, I'd love to do it all, but I think whatever we decide here, we're vastly improving a number, and that's what I wanted us to keep remembering. And I really appreciate the layout here, so thank you.
So again, the projects that you've listed, these aren't all of the projects that needs to be done in the city. These are the worst of the worst, if I'm understanding it correctly. Okay.
correct. It's kind of a combination of like the curb and asphalt patch repair. Those are things that really have to get done. The preservative treatment, that's kind of a strong recommendation. If we continue on with the recommendation of the slurry seal, those are neighborhoods that Public Works staff has been working in for the past 2-3 years to get the initial preparatory step done, because we can't put a slurry seal down unless cracks are sealed and thermal cracks are repaired. So our staff has done that hard work first in preparation for something else, and we don't have the ability to go further.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue doing that as staff, moving into other neighborhoods and getting those prepared, and eventually we'll hope that we can finish those.
So if I can explain what I just passed out, this is something that Ted put together for budget numbers for us. So at the top, you'll see for 2019, total resources available about $690,000. So that's with our ending balance of the fund from 2018, and then the transfers in from street, solid waste, and then from general fund. So you see $500,000 in revenue going to come in, and then if you use the cash balance, you got $690,000. The repairs that Ann proposed total about $392,000. So there is some more, and that would leave a ending balance of $298,000. So there's some additional funds there, and you can kind of see going down 2019. Estimated costs like Baton to Kruger, $390,000. Belmore, Memphis to Odessa is $190,000 for reconstruction, and then the other projects. The reason that when Ann was saying about $400,000, we left about $100,000 in there for something that may come up later on. We need downstairs needs carpet bad. That's about $35,000. The roof at the rec center, with the last snowfall, they had about 15 buckets out there. They need some roof repair at $50,000. There may be some other street repairs that come up this year. So again, that's just something for you to think about. Is as you're looking what you want to do this year on streets, and you want to save some back in case something happens between now and then, or the end of the year, that we'd have some funds available for that as well.
And this fund isn't a fund where we have to maintain the 30% reserve, right?
Nope.
So if we were to spend every penny that we could in here on streets, and then something were to happen and we were to really absolutely have to spend $50,000 on something else, we'd have to pull that in from the reserves of the general fund to do that?
So we'd have to take it out of the general fund. Now what may happen is then we may overextend in some line item, because we've got to take it out of somewhere, and then you'd have to do a budget amendment saying that you're going to spend more than what you budgeted to spend those.
So I know we were, if I recall correctly, we were going to be over that 30% number by quite a bit. So
Right.
So you've put in money here for the roof on the rec center? Is that?
Well, no, I'm just
planned in
saying,
there?
if you look at capital improvement reserve estimated costs, so there's some costs there that we didn't include in
Okay, I
that
see.
400,000. But if you wanted to include it, it's there, and that's what it costs. Or down below, reconstruction streets. There's 190 for Belmore, and there's 390. So, again, you could, as you were saying, you could maybe do a reconstruction of 190 and then do some of the repairs that Ann was talking about and leave some for the next year.
Yeah, my own personal opinion, I wouldn't, all the curb and guttering things that she's proposed, they all need it. Yeah. I've seen them all, and that's all needed. I mean, but if Batten's got ones that are even worse than these.
Yeah.
But we're talking about reconstruction on it, and I didn't get a chance to go look at this other neighborhood on Belmore, but I'm sure it's the same way because I've seen them before. So I haven't looked at it in the last week, but I just wanted to see if maybe there was some way we can move this around and we can do that. But I don't want us to put it in a situation where if we know we got to do these other things, we need to make sure we have the money to do those other things. I mean, we can't have the roof on the rec center leaking. That's crazy. Yeah. So we got to fix that.
Well, I certainly agree. The curb repair and asphalt patch repair items are things we got to do. I certainly agree with your sentiment. Yeah, I mean, I've been out and driven past these things, and these are the types of street problems where if you drive your car over it, your car will be destroyed. Or if you have a small child, you could lose your child into the section of missing street. It's that bad. So yeah, these are, and I know it's and Batten, it's what we're dealing with here is neglect over time, and this is where that worst case scenario that Ann always reminds us that if you neglect doing the preventive maintenance type things, it stings you after a number of years go by, and that's what we're facing with. So, as far as preserving the these newer neighborhoods that are listed, Central Park, Elk Creek, Rock Spring, we do need to balance this. After reviewing all of this, I tend to favor the way Ann has it written out right now. I think there's a good balance of trying to preserve the new streets, because let's face it, when we're trying to market our community and we're going to have realtors and developers and stuff going into the newer neighborhoods, we can't afford to let those deteriorate. Those have to be preserved. And I know if a longtime resident of Bel Aire that lives in the older sections glances at this list, they see these newer neighborhoods right at the top, and they say, "Oh, you guys only care about the newer neighborhoods." And I'm certainly sensitive to that. I get that. But we do have to strike a balance between restoring what we have that's really bad and maintaining the newer areas. We do have to strike a balance there. I think this list for this year, for the most part, does it. I'm willing to consider different ideas. And as far as how to spend that remaining, money that we have hanging in the balance, assuming we do that short list that Ann has there, short being compared to all the other stuff. I'm willing to talk about that, of course. And I just lost my train of thought. I guess let's see. I was just thinking of. Well, I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say at the moment.
I'll just point out, this is something that every community is facing right now, the street improvements.
Yeah.
That's, but I agree with everything that's been said here, and you got to be sensitive to that. Yes, some of these newer ones, but how it really does make the most financial sense. It's just going to cost the city way more, by doing this that way.
I guess, sorry to interrupt. I regained my train of thought.
Go ahead.
I guess, I think it's our job to ultimately look at what is the best value for the whole city overall, balancing those aspects. And I think that was really at the forefront of my mind when I'm going through these items on these lists is one way or another, these all have to get done eventually. But what is the best value? What's the best bang for our buck? And then also another thought that I had that I forgot about is, what about if we consider tackling these smaller, I guess you call them the smaller individualized type repairs this year, and maybe lay down some kind of a plan for next year for doing, for example, Batten and Belmore, or some of the full construction, focus. So like next year we wouldn't do any preservative treatments. Next year we would do a couple of...
Kind of like in every other year, back and forth?
Yeah, exactly. So that was my second thought on that. I don't know if you guys have considered that as well, but, I think if we spend this money on these items, for next year we ought to pick a road that's going to be completely reconstructed and at least do that, and then see what we can else, how much money can we send into that street repair as a priority, since it is basically the highest priority of this council and has been. Mm-hmm. I'm in favor of looking at something like that kind of approach. I'm not really interested in changing too much what we have. I think this is a good plan, mm-hmm. but I think we need to do a good job of communicating why we're picking this plan, at least.
So I hear you saying, so we do I guess not a lot, but a number more improvements this year. 2020, complete construction. 2021, another large group of improvements. 2022, another reconstruction. Yeah, and I'm putting you on the spot. We just had this thought. Jeff wants to say something? I do. What would your thoughts on that be, Ann?
That's similar to what I had proposed, mm-hmm. as doing either Batten or Belmore, if we have the funding for both next year or in 2021, have that coming fairly soon, so we can do the balancing of the two. There will need to be some funds that are set aside for the patch repair, because they pop up all the time. Right. The one on Stratford, we drove down it one day, and the next day it was a mess.
Well, and all the snow and salt and sand that we had this year that we didn't have last year.
Right, and so that makes a big difference. I do want to point out that 53rd Street between Oliver and Woodlawn, if that development on the corner is a go, then that street's going to need some help, because we've been band-aiding it for years. It's in much better condition than the other two sections of 53rd that we've redone, but if you put too much additional traffic, it's not going to last very long. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Yeah, we're band-aiding it as much as we can. I've saved $30,000 for street repairs towards the end of the year.
Go ahead, Jeff.
As far as the preservative treatment, you said these are basically the only places that would even accept it anyway. So we're 5 years away from having to kind of redo that, correct? Is that on like Central Park, Elk Creek, Rock Creek?
Just on the one type of treatment.
Right. So that's an expense that we
oil.
Shouldn't have to worry about for another 5 years until we start getting new roads.
On those streets.
Right.
The slurry seal needs to be done on a bunch of and that's a preservative treatment as well. It's just a different type.
Yeah, somebody that's been in my house for 17 years, I remember when they used to do slurry seals on Odessa, And all of a sudden you got, signs that say fresh oil, and you're like, ooh, drive a little slower, make sure you don't get that on your car. But, and yeah, it's been a long time since. Is there, okay, so we put $400,000 in the budget for roads this past year, is that right?
Well, there's actually 500,000.
500?
But that, doing what Ann is proposing, that leaves you 100,000.
So, my point is if we continue at our current growth, which, I mean, it looks like definitely this year, but by what is getting started with the houses and everything, is there a kind of a plan that you have as far as you can kind of see where, okay, we've got 500,000 this year, we can up that by the percentage of growth, we can continue to up that by the same growth that's coming in the town, and kind of go, okay, in 3 years, we'll be at the point where only preventative is needed, or is there kind of, I guess I'm kind of asking if you have kind of a 10-year plan, just kind of based on if we can continue funding this the same way, or a little more, hopefully, kind of where we would be at, what we would see, kind of give a vision of the future for people to see that where the money on the roads is going, and yeah, it's going to take a little time, but where we will be type thing. Is that?
I do not have one right now. If you give me 500,000 every year, I can certainly put one together, looking 5-10 years into the future.
I mean, yeah, even if you went the conservative, that we were able to put the same amount, I think that would be very beneficial to kind of see where we. I mean, obviously nobody knows if a road's going to completely fail or not.
Right.
But barring that, I think being able to show the public that this is what we're doing, this is what we're committed to doing, is fixing the roads, and it's going to take a little while, but we're going to get there type thing. I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, I can certainly put something together, and putting in more concrete streets is definitely helping because they need a lot less maintenance than the asphalt. We're not doing anything to the concrete streets that have been put in the last 3 years.
The reconstruction cost that you've got estimated, is that concrete reconstruction or asphalt reconstruction?
It could be either.
About the same cost on that?
Yeah, roughly. I've got it padded enough that I think we could go concrete on that.
So I was looking on the seal, and
Yes.
it's not the slurry seal, it's just this treatment. You've got a quote here for about 100,000.
Correct.
Okay, and that takes care of all the neighborhoods that can be done in. Is that correct? Okay, and half of that is just one neighborhood, but I get that. That's
Yes.
because it's
Bigger.
size.
Yes.
Okay, whatever. So, but you said you had 200,000 that you wanted us to make a decision over and above the curb and asphalt repair.
Correct.
And that was, the 100,000 was that. Is that correct?
No, the 100,000 plus the curb and gutter repair plus saving 30,000 for 53rd Street, that gets me to about that 200,000. So then there's additional 200,000 out of the 400 budgeted that I need.
Oh, so you could do all this on page 1.
Correct.
Plus your 30,000 reserve, and you still
Correct.
need another 200,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And that
We'll make
I
sure
was,
that's what we're looking
yes.
at. Okay.
And that I was suggesting doing some slurry seal treatments, but it's, I'd like to have you.
So Bel Aire Heights slurry seal is 140. Baton, Memphis, Odessa is 190. Reconstruction. 47th and Homestead is 50,000.
Yeah.
So there's
47th
several.
and Homestead. That's pretty darn bad, and there's a lot of traffic going through there. It's a small enough area that it can get done fairly easily.
Yeah, because that's all there by the rec center, right?
The reconstruction streets, you're going to do all of Baton?
It would be Baton from Kruger to 48th Street.
All of Baton and up to Kruger, back over to 48th Street, down Kruger. So you're going to do Baton and 48th. When I drove Baton, I didn't think it was all that bad except the curb and guttering on the right-hand side when you're going south.
When there's no parked cars there, it's
It's bad.
It's pretty bad. It's
I don't
to
recall
the
parked
point
cars.
where, I mean, you can try and patch it, but you're going to be doing so much patching, you might as well just redo the whole thing. It's kind of at that tipping point.
Okay, so on the batten part, you've got that in the plan for this year,
No.
next year.
It's just a placeholder of how much it estimated cost. It's not plugged into it's not subtracted from what we're spending yet. It's just sitting here as a placeholder value.
Okay, so we don't do the curb repair ourselves, right?
Correct.
Well, if the company that bids on it gets all of these curb repairs, would they be willing, while they've got their equipment and stuff out here, to go look at other streets and do those also this year?
We can find some additional streets. These were the worst ones, but what I kind of deter you from doing is just, if we're going to, like Batten, if we're going to be reconstructing it in a year or two, we don't want to just come and pick and choose pieces of that to fix. We want to do the whole thing at once.
All right.
Because it's at a point where it needs to be completely redone.
Because I had a phone call from a resident on Batten, and I went over and looked at it, and right there by this yellow house, as you go around the curve, because I went to the rec center and drove down Batten toward the south. If we don't do something to that, water's going to get under that curb, and it's going to erupt in that street. I mean, I didn't see too much wrong with the street, except it's got those black zigzag marks all over it. But the curbs are bad on the right-hand side.
And we need to go through and redo. It's too bad that if you picked and choosed, it would just look awful.
Yeah.
So I will make a drive-by. I have not gotten there recently. I drove there and kind of towards the end of last year.
Well, it's got concrete sticking up that high off of it.
Yeah.
And if a truck or a child falls over that, it's going to be too bad.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'll see if there's places that we can put some cold patch in to maybe help a little bit. But you're trying to stick. You're sticking a finger in.
What'd you say?
How many bags cold patch could
I don't know.
I mean, they're pretty deep.
It's bad.
They're
There's some
deep
pretty
holes.
deep holes in that street.
Well, it's like when I drove down Rodeo. I thought, I'm not driving across that. I might lose my car.
Yeah.
It's bad.
We've gotten quite a few calls on rodeo as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that the preventative treatment is definitely necessary to kind of make sure we're breaking the cycle here and not perpetuating these street problems. And so as much as it, may kind of be unfortunate that we can't spend more on the reconstruction, I think that's going to maybe have to be kind of what it is for this year.
Yeah. On this spreadsheet, you've got $161,000 for the preventative, and this quote was $103.
It's got the curb and asphalt repair added in.
Oh, that's all thrown in there. Okay. Yeah, I can't. Looking at as I get a better understanding, handle of what we're looking at here, I'm kind of thinking you got to go do that slurry seal in those areas that you've done all this work in public works already. So Bel Aire Heights and 47th and Homestead, because you won't let that be a wasted effort. So I'm just
As long as it stays in and doesn't wash out the next day.
the slurry seal.
We'll
No, the coal patch.
Oh, the coal patch.
That's an ongoing battle.
I know. I don't think they're tapping it down hard enough.
They're doing they're doing as good of a job as they can with the conditions.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So
Better than nothing.
yeah, I mean you've seen the entrance to Elk Creek. We've put cold patch in there half a dozen times, and it just keeps popping out within a couple days. So that's one of the locations we've got to repair.
See, that street's really not that old, so that's why I don't understand why we're doing all this reconstruction stuff in Central Park and all those places. Was it not put down good when it was put in the first time?
It's not the preservative treatment on Central Park. That's just putting, because as time goes on, this sunlight rays evaporate the oil that's in the asphalt, and that causes it to get brittle and break, and then you get all the potholes. You get more potholes, you get the cracking, and the more of that you get, the worse your street condition gets. So this preservative treatment puts it back in. The particular location at Elk Creek and Rock Road, I think that was just the joint where the Rock Road meets up with the Elk Creek pavement, and ideally that probably should have been a concrete return like we're putting in pretty much every other subdivision where you've got those turning movements, because I think that's really what's hurting it, as well as that's where you got a lot of water that's coming down and running right along that ridge. And so the water with the freeze thaw action that we've had this year, it's popping stuff out.
Do you think that ridge is different than it is across the street with Deer Run? Because Deer Run they did their little addition, and they took about half that lane and redid it along there. But I don't know if that makes any sense. Or
that was my request, because there was a big dip in the outside tire track. And so I know when I drove down it, I could feel my car pulling into that dip. Yeah. And we've got several areas like that along Rock Road. And since they were doing that project, I knew we'd have more turning movements there and it would just get worse. So we included as part of the developer's agreement that they replace that location. And so far it's held.
Yeah.
I was obviously not involved in Elk Creek, so I'm not sure how that construction occurred, but I think we should be fine with Deer Run.
So evidently we had better streets in the old park.
Amazingly enough, yeah, the Pearson's Edition are
this place was built in 204, and Elk Creek and all those other places weren't too far behind it, and that's only 15 years and falling apart.
Well, I got to do maintenance.
Yeah.
So maybe the only question that's kind of left in my mind is, as proposed, we'll have an ending cash balance of almost $300,000 in the fund, and maybe the roof needs to be done, which is $50,000, which takes you to about $250,000 left in the fund. Should we consider spending $190 of that $250 on that Memphis to Odessa reconstruction this year?
I don't think so, because if something else happens, you got to have that money to. You got a big water leak that goes across the road. Well, how are you going to fix it?
And the good thing with that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's something we could always pull over later without earmarking it today for our next meeting.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but I like what Justin's saying.
If you want to, identify the preservation, we could get started on that, and then see how those dollars come out. We may save a little bit. You just never know how busy they're going to be. And then if you wanted to take a look at Belmore, maybe this summer, after we did some preservation, and see how we're doing on funds, and maybe get a bid at that point.
And I guess my only thought on that too is we maybe don't have to be so risk averse with this fund that we have to make sure we could absolutely cover every possible emergency street repair, because we have other reserve funds designated for our emergencies. We don't need reserve fund on reserve fund on reserve fund necessarily. So I want to make sure we're not being so risk averse in our thinking about this.
Because we have card quotes for the preservative treatment and then the curb and asphalt repair. Those are ready to be signed at your meeting next week if you're agreeable to that. I can get hard numbers on slurry seal for, say, the Bel Aire Heights and then that 47th and Homestead, if you're interested in pursuing that, or if you wanted to save those funds for next year to do the reconstruction work. That's
I think based on the amount of pre-work that's already been done, especially like Bel Aire Heights, that I think it's important to finish the job of the maintenance and get it prevented, so that it's not again going into the point of patchwork and curb work. And I think that's super important. I mean, you can't leave a job half done.
Yeah, I think we should get the firm numbers on those and then kind of see where we're at, and then maybe have another discussion in a month or two about whether we think it's appropriate to pull in another small project.
We can do that in the future. But basically, to come before us is going to be this, 191 and some change recommendations. That's
161.
151.
61.
160.
Oh,
he's
why am I adding the
30,000?
30,000? I was adding 30,000. I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, the 161. So we're comfortable bringing that to our next meeting. So we'll have that on the agenda. Continue with what Councilmember Smith was saying. Let's not end the discussion today. I think, but let's go ahead and put the 161 on the agenda for the next meeting, so that you guys can get started on that. And then Ty to remind me in a couple of months, let's bring this back up. Maybe it's say our June or July workshop or something.
So we can maybe get a bid for Bel Aire Heights, because you don't have the firm bid on that,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested in moving forward with that one and the 50,000 estimate on the 47th Street and
Okay.
Homestead as well. I think
Get the
we
bid
should
on
get
those.
those bids as well.
Yeah.
And then what's the kind of the latest point in the year that we'd be able to initiate a project for Kruger or for Memphis to Odessa?
For Gilmore, it's just the length of time. Contractors generally get their best bids in like the late fall, early winter, and they're planning work for the following year.
So July would be a good time.
July would be
a good time.
Perfect.
Yep, and
Okay.
then going out
That
and
sounds great.
getting bids October, November, December, kind of in that time frame for work the following year, or to start over the winter with the understanding that the street can only be closed for a short period of time for residents.
That's right.
Okay. All right, and you're comfortable with this?
Yes.
The additional bids? Thank you. Appreciate this. Okay. Anything else we want to talk about for that? Like I said, the discussion will continue. WAMPO future projects, what do we know on that?
Well, that's we're competing for a little. I mean, $12 million is not a little money, but when we're trying to go up against Wichita and Sedgwick County and Andover and Valley Center, that's not a lot that we're competing against. So obviously, they over time they give different people different amounts, and so we've been fortunate. We got 37th Street done a few years ago. Woodlawn is set in 2020, and so our thought was, let's start maybe look at something in the next 5 years, that we can get on. And so that was our thought, to get some ideas from you, maybe in the next 5 and maybe at 10 years, what we should be trying to get in the pike through the TIP program, so that we can get approved for some funding. One street that I've thought about, and I've already talked to Wichita on, is Rock Road. Mm-hmm. So we've got the commercial corner at 45th and Rock, and we're trying to get something developed up here at 53rd and Rock. And then, of course, we hear a lot about the intersection of 45th and Rock, although it's not ours, it's Wichita's. And then as you head south of there,
It's terrible.
to the tracks, that's in bad shape too, and that's a Wichita. And so I was at a event a couple of weeks ago with the engineer from the city of Wichita, and said, what if we did a joined project like we did on 37th and go from the railroad tracks all the way up to 53rd and include the intersection there, maybe the intersection at 45th? And he said, we'd certainly be open to that. And so if you can get, a couple communities working together, that always gives you a little bump up on the project list. And of course, Wichita and Sedgwick County have more votes than the rest of us do as well. So that was one thought I had, maybe for 2025. But you can name a lot of other streets that, 45th and 53rd and
I've heard about 45th and Oliver,
you could just
yeah.
name anyone. But it might be good to get your thoughts on, what we should put in for 2025 and then maybe 2030 again. And so that's what we're kind of wanting your thoughts on, what you want us to pursue.
With the new horizon that WAMPO's looking at, the 11-year horizon, I think you should put in more projects now. and just target them for timed out, because what happened to them, I think it was last year, they didn't have enough projects to cover the tip money they had that were ready to go out of the MTP.
Really?
And so if you have some projects out there to think about, you might be in a position to say, yeah, go do that.
So these things are planned out years in advance.
Yeah, they are. But it was like they got surprised that they didn't have enough projects ready to go to cover their tip for that year.
Well, we've thrown out there, 45th, Rock. Did I hear Oliver?
Oliver,
Yeah, and I've had actually some citizens ask me about completing Woodlawn up to 53rd.
Yeah, Woodlawn go north.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
I mean, the
I had one
major.
guy that lives on Woodlawn said, why aren't we going all the way to 53rd? And I said, well, because it's not approved.
Yeah.
We went, but we don't have the money to go to our own.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, we're getting to the size that all our major arteries need to be 3 lanes at least. I mean, it's getting to that point. At least.
I agree. How is the maintenance on Oliver's? Is that shared with Wichita?
No.
It's exclusively Bel Aire's.
Bel Aire's.
If we have to redo Oliver, would they share in that, or because they're on the west side of it?
They might, because that's the situation we have on 37th Street.
Yeah.
The only issue, though, I think, is on their side, there's nothing there, and Coke owns pretty much.
There's the neighborhood over there.
The one neighborhood. Yeah.
Pretty big neighborhood.
Yeah, so it would be if they felt like that they, would benefit enough to share in that.
Well, I definitely think, personally, 45th or Rock would be my top 2 priorities, thinking out loud, but I would not be opposed to maybe staff taking a long, hard look at some of these things and projections and add to my list here, guys. I've got 45th, I've got Rock Road, Oliver, and Woodlawn to 53rd. Those are the 4 that I heard. And kind of maybe give a priority.
And probably 53rd.
Well, 53rd.
And 53rd too. So maybe those 5, would that be something? And then
Yes.
let's look at picking our top 2 out of that that we could apply to.
I like the Rock at first, especially with the chances of Wichita being in on it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might put our chances up to get that sooner rather than later. I like that idea a lot, because then also we can maybe split a little bit of that cost of our portion of it too with Wichita if they're in on it. Obviously our goal here is to be self-sufficient. I mean, if candy and nuts were, y'all know that saying, so I'm not going to say it. But, but Sunflower Park, if it keeps growing the way it does, I mean, in 10 years when we're looking at maybe another one of these WAMPO projects like 45th Street, maybe that's where we have the money to do Oliver all on our own, or something like that. So, but I personally think Rock would be my top choice as far as putting it up.
Is there a reason that you would only stop at 53rd and we can go all the way to 254 on Rock?
No, the only reason I thought about that is, well, number one, the cost.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at...
Obviously.
That's a big reason.
That's a big deal.
And, right now our growth is basically up to 53rd and the school and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's really just goes down to cost, what we think we can project out. And a mile is, we're looking at $3 million or so that we have to pay.
True.
All right, so let's look at those 5 and just take kind of some pros and cons, and then a couple months we can decide. Because and hopefully we can get another one of our streets. And we're talking about the 2025 project. That would be ideal. So,
Should we submit them all?
My recommendation is for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is what the TIP is chosen out of.
Mm-hmm.
My plan is to put every single one of our major streets in that plan.
Great.
That way we can talk as we're going through, as they're talking about the TIP. We see where our priorities are, because this round we were kind of locked into I think Woodlawn, there may have been another street in there, so I just want to make sure that we're not locked into anything else again, that we've got the options.
And we'll likely get the most support from Wampo on Rock, maybe on Oliver. That would be my hope, is that Wichita would at least support us in getting it through Wampo, even if they weren't willing to share in the cost there.
Who's doing that hillside and 45th?
That's a Wampo project.
It is?
Yeah, Wichita. Yeah.
Well, what about 45th, Woodlawn to 45th, and then asking Wampo to go on the other side,
To Hillside.
a hillside rather, from Hillside back to Oliver.
That's a county road, and so Sedgwick County would have to start that, initiate that project.
You're saying 45th Street between Oliver and Hillside?
No, Woodlawn to Oliver down 45th.
Yep.
Yeah, especially Edgewater to Woodlawn, but yeah, the whole thing probably.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, it is.
Because if they're redoing the railroad tracks in that intersection at Hillside, then maybe they would pick up from the railroad track and come past Stuckey.
Yeah. The county.
Maybe
Yeah,
what we
it's
can
county.
do is get with the city and the county and see what their plans are. If they're doing anything up in this area, what they're thinking.
Is Stuckey actually in the county or is it in the city?
Stuckey's in
I think it's in
In
the
the
city.
city
It's only
Wichita.
access is the county road.
Because Coca annexed all that stuff over there on the west side of Oliver.
Folks, the city?
Darn near.
I don't think they annexed.
They purchased it probably, but yeah.
Well, they've had that land for a long time.
Well, they came to us and wanted us to annex it to be in Bel Aire, but we couldn't get water and sewer over there. I mean, we could, but we couldn't afford it.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on to home-based business code update. We have the report here in front of us. So, Jackie, that.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All these Article 8s. I noticed, so.
These are not Section 8s.
Yeah, but this is something about a year ago we talked about reviewing this ordinance because of the lengthy process and the licensing and everything and the cost and the fact that it's a little ambiguous. Is it someone giving piano lessons out of their house, a home-based business? Is it someone selling Mary Kay products, but they don't have anybody come to their house? Is that, versus someone who actually has a full-size, obviously there's no storefronts in the homes. But so, Jackie, if you want to kind of just run through this, and I know we've had our committees working on this for quite a while too, and have spent a lot of time on that. So the Planning Commission for that, right now, we've got to give notice to neighbors and everything. This really hasn't been an issue, but we certainly want to be a business-friendly city. So that's why we want to go for this, because we want it. Heck, I think everybody should have a business, and make money while they're living here. So.
Right. So exactly, the old ordinance or the ordinance that's in place now just needed to be cleaned up generally because it was somewhat confusing, and it just led to staff just being careful and just pulling everybody into the home-based business ordinance. So we cleaned that up. I guess just to set a framework for your discussion. The directive was to streamline the process, make more people able to go through an easier process, and so Planning Commission came up with a 3-tier system. Basically, Tier 1 is no impact, no material impact, right? So they are businesses that no one would know that they're operating in their home. Just if you drove by or if you were on your lot, you could still enjoy your lot without feeling any impact from that business. Tier 2 would be the group that would have minimal impact. Just if you go to the version of the article with the smaller font and go back to the chart, That's probably the best way to kind of frame the discussion. Tier 1 sample examples are not required to register. That captures a lot of typical home-based businesses. Tier 2 would be required to register. Those are folks who have certain conditions tied to their business that may disrupt someone else's quiet enjoyment of their property. So if they need external storage, if they have one or more business-related sign, if the business owner has 2 or more on-site employees coming to the property, or if for some other reason, some other public safety or health concern, the city zoning administrator or the police chief believes that they need to be on the list of businesses which register. Tier 3 will probably turn out to be the least used category, which now is the only category. If you have a home-based business, everybody goes through this Tier 3 process, which involves a lot of fees, at least 60 days worth of notice through the Planning Commission process, and is costly. So Tier 3 in this proposed ordinance would be those businesses which create more disruption to the neighborhood or create a greater health, safety, or welfare concern for the public. So for instance, last year we did have a gunsmithing business go through the home-based business process. Frankly, that business would probably still go through the same process they went through. But Councilmember Benage, who went through the home-based business process, would not. So because he practices in his home, he has no traffic coming and going, whereas the gunsmithing business, the business owner keeps valuable, expensive guns and possibly ammunition. I'm not sure. Actually, I think he said he doesn't keep any ammunition on the property. But that's a safety concern. If law enforcement ever had to go out to the home for burglary, they need to know that there were such things on the property.
I guess that would concern me a little bit, because what I remember about that was he did occasional gunsmithing from his house that was by appointment only, which in my mind, as I read through these criteria, I would have said that there wasn't anything about that business that maybe would have qualified it as a Tier 3 business, because I don't know that would have a material impact on anyone in the surrounding area.
And that's something that can be debated. That's why you do have, in both processes, you do have the zoning administrator involved. It's not a blind process. I think the details matter. If he's doing one gun on appointment only, the person comes and takes the weapon with them. If he's storing a few and you make the appointment and you leave a few at his house and he's locking and protecting someone's property, then it becomes or storing someone's weapons, it does become something that you may want law enforcement to just at least be aware of.
So that he didn't work on regular guns, he worked on antique guns.
A lot of restoration.
See, those facts matter, and that's why your zoning administrator would review every application.
No. I think also if you have a home-based business and you're claiming stuff on the insurance or your taxes, and you're getting insurance, especially if you're holding somebody else's valuables. Obviously, you probably have a certain rider that says you have a business. Wouldn't the requirement for most of the stuff be that you have a business license with the city that you're in? I believe it is. On a lot of that stuff. I know that if you're claiming a home-based business and you get audited and there's stipulations that you're supposed to be licensed and you don't have a license, you can get in a lot of trouble for claiming that home-based business stuff. So
Well, he has to have a state license too.
yeah.
The guy that's doing the guns.
Yeah. So those are the 3 frameworks. I mean, we can adjust them. I know Planning Commission kind of poured over details and facts and kind of thought this was a good idea to present. We can go through those. I also wanted you to know before you start your discussion that Planning Commission compared several cities around, and we kind of found that everybody fit into 3 categories. So there's Derby, which the Derby model is everybody registered. All businesses were required to register. Mary Kay, baking a couple cookies here and there, everybody who had a business was required to register. The cost was low. It's like $20 a year. And they use it as somewhat of a way to create like an economic development relationship with home-based business owners, and they do trainings and they welcome everybody to City Hall and they kind of keep track of everybody. It's kind of that's the way they handle it. Then you have a city like Oklahoma City, which their city doesn't regulate any businesses. So unless you are brick and mortar, you do what you want and nobody's asking questions about that. So then there's some cities in the middle. I think the model that Planning Commission recommends to you is somewhere in the middle where you do regulate where health and safety or is a concern, or where something they really valued is when you impact a neighboring property's ability to enjoy their home because of traffic or because of signage or because of noise, odor, etc. Then maybe there should be a little bit of a cost there. So,
but I remember the questions, in previous councils and other times when things have come before. It seems like the number one question is, will there be increased traffic? And obviously, if you're running a daycare, you're getting kids dropped off, from 6 to 9 a.m. and then getting kids picked up from 3 to 6 p.m. That's different as opposed to someone like said is making stuff for bake sales or whatever on the weekend. Mm-hmm. So, I pretty much think that was the question asked on every single one.
Right.
And for the most part, if there wasn't any additional traffic, no one knew, and no one was too worried. So,
well, and I think this one I'm looking at proposed list and traffic or daytime adult care.
right.
That they're not being required to register. Child daycares are required to register. I guess adult daycare probably might involve 1 or 2 adults needing some high intensive care. But
Is that like if you hire, someone to come take care of
Exactly.
an individual at your home that comes there 2 hours a day? Yeah, that's
Right.
different.
right,
But they have to get a license through state.
exactly.
Right.
Well, and the traffic is specifically called out in a
Right.
different section
Yep.
to say that the traffic is regulated. So
Yep.
I think that's
Yep.
been adequately addressed. I do want to say I attended several of the Planning Commission meetings where they discussed this, and Jackie's description of them poring over this and studying it and giving this the thorough due diligence that it warrants is absolutely there, and I really appreciate the amount of effort that they put into this. I think this is a really great proposal. This is implementing this would be a big step forward for the city of Bel Aire. I think it will help us with our marketing
Yep.
and our ability to grow, businesses here in Bel Aire. I think this sends a signal of us being a business-friendly city, and that will help us in our marketing ventures.
I agree 110%.
Yeah, I like what they put together. I do have a couple questions about this. So the hobby is $2,500 a year, and I think you probably got that from the IRS. Is that correct?
I believe so. That was
Yeah, I
a
think
while
that
ago,
was
but
it.
yes, it was some.
But I just wonder if the IRS would ever change their rule on what constitutes a hobby. Would we want to have this flexible enough that it would just go with the IRS rule? And I just a suggestion, okay, that maybe that just say whatever the definition of IRS definition of a hobby is, and that's our definition here. That makes it a little more ambiguous, and you can't just grab out that number, but this number I think has been an IRS rule for years. So, but Congress changes things every year. So.
They do, and they can. So
Yeah.
that I smile because Justin has been very involved in this process and has kind of keep everybody focused on the right things. But this came up in this exact conversation.
Okay.
Came up. They had that conversation. They went from putting in a number that they thought was reasonable to no, we should go by the IRS guidelines and reference it. Ultimately, what won out in their proposal was the actual number, the $2,500, a fixed number, because they felt that part of their charge was to make it simple and make it so that way a business owner could come in and look at this and not have to reference some other material in order to start their business. I mean, if you all like that, we could address that through marketing, kind of update marketing materials every year. I don't know. But it did come up.
And they talked about tying it to the CPI as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh boy.
It gets really complicated.
Yeah, that just makes a mess.
But while we're in that section, maybe one comment or something that we should consider is it says home automotive repair shall be limited to occupants' vehicles and occupants' immediate families' vehicles only. I could foresee it as maybe a pretty common situation to where you might have a friend that brings over a vehicle to your house, and you help that friend with the vehicle, and you're not charging them
Their
to
family
work
for a
on that
day.
vehicle. They're good enough friends that they're family, and you're just helping them out because they're your friend. I don't know that
You're
I
buying
would,
them dinner because they're going to help you with something. Yeah.
right. I don't know that I would want anything in this to make that technically illegal. I question whether that would be enforceable practically anyway, but I might be in favor of just striking that comment.
Well, I kind of like it just because it does, at least the language does keep out the people that have friends come over all the time, and if it's something that is habitual, it can be tracked and I think that would be enforceable. I think that would be enforceable at that time, but I don't think this is going to negate the neighbor that says, yeah, bring your car over, I'll help you fix your brakes, like my neighbor did for me. So, I mean,
Like the guy on Woodlawn.
But under this proposal, that would actually not be legal, right?
Yippee.
Right, I'm reading through it, and I was looking because you said, help me fix my car. I'm like, well, what does
I know
this say?
there was no monetary.
Yeah, he's not charging, he's not advertising on
Right.
Craigslist or whatever.
So
He's not doing it. Well,
Right.
the difference is he's not doing it as a home-based automotive repair business. He's doing it as a, hey, I know about cars. I'll help you work on
Which
your car.
may fall into like a hobby, which is where this comment is
It
in this
says it
section.
shall not be a hobby. And it was the issue, I think Planning Commission recognized that several neighborhoods struggle with people who are working on friends' cars, and they cause the neighborhood to look unkept and, cars on blocks. And so, but I see your point. I mean, everybody's going to occasionally work on a friend's car.
Yeah.
However,
like I said, I don't think that falls into the purview of what this says about.
actually,
automotive
this
repair.
would limit it. This would, you're not allowed to work on anybody's car unless it's your family member.
Well,
But you're going to make it $2,500.
Yeah, it's within making money, right? I mean, who works on a friend's car for money?
That's
I mean,
not how
No,
it's
it's
worded.
under, it's worded to say at all, ever, never at all.
So we need to change that.
Okay.
Even though the heading
We'll fix
says
that word.
It does, but the way that it's worded, so if you read that last part, it says regardless of financial income amount generated by the home automotive repair hobby. So the hobby is only on your own vehicle. And again, it was just this, from Planning Commission, they had a really strong desire to limit it from people keeping junk cars in their home, on their.
Well, I
And-
appreciate that.
I appreciate that too. I actually think that might be more within the purview of an HOA to regulate that type of activity, and I might just throw that out there, that might be more of an HOA.
What about the ones that don't have HOA?
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of neighborhoods that
That
don't
don't.
have HOA covenants and don't enforce.
We officially
Can we
have it
just-
anyway.
Legal
Can we just
Lincoln
have this
one.
reworded as far as?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just
Occasional.
I don't either.
reworded as far as.
See, you
I mean,
can do
if it's a
That's right.
HOA
automotive
can't
repair
come after
business,
you.
That's right.
which is, and put that business or that automotive repair. I mean, just have it a different way. I mean, that's not a hobby. If you're having cars come over
All the
all
time.
the time, I mean, I got a buddy that fixes cars, and he'll charge $200 for a brake job, but
Right.
it's a heck of a lot cheaper than taking it to Midas for a brake job. So, and it doesn't take very many of those to hit that $2,500 mark. I mean.
Well, yeah, I think what I can do is I can certainly insert something that would say occasional repair, and occasional be kind of viewed as once or twice a year working on a car that is not a non-familial car is okay. If you want to include, so that I think addresses most of what I'm hearing, but if you want to include a home-based business license for an automotive repair business, that's something different. Right now,
Yeah.
we don't have any provisions for those in Bel Aire, so that's something you'd want to talk about if you want to do that.
I mean, I'm just, like I said, I'm looking at that. My son's brakes on his car were out, and my neighbor backed it into his garage. He's got a 2-ton jack that he works on his own cars, and he helped me change out the brake pads.
Okay, so then he's confining it to the garage, and that's
Well,
okay.
I mean, it's half and half.
Okay. Maybe something like that. What do you think about something like that going through a conditional use process? So in order for your friend to have that business, he would go
Well,
through
but
this.
it wasn't a business. He just
just
knows.
did
He
it.
just knows how to do something.
Oh, so then he would be the occasional user.
He didn't
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it for money. He just did it as a favor.
Yeah.
So then I
Yeah.
think we might be able to capture him, so long as he's not doing it every month.
Yeah, no.
Then under the occasional use. So I'll adjust the language to make room for some occasional use of, or occasional automotive repair for non-familial people. Understand that's going to make it harder to enforce when citizens call, and they do, to complain about the neighbors having excessive cars in their yard.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, first of all, I guess I got a few comments, but first of all, I just want to thank the Planning Commission immensely for all the hard work that went into this. This is really great. I share the sentiments of other council members in favoring this change. I certainly am impressed by it, and I think it addresses a lot of concerns that we raised. One thought I had here on the automotive thing is, do we perhaps need to break out the automotive as a completely separate section? And just address that, since that's a fairly common kind of typical kind of issue. I think there's a lot of us that would perhaps know somebody in the city or have a buddy that works on a car, and it seems like it would be almost everybody in the city could very likely get under this somehow.
Right.
And maybe for clarity, have it its own heading, its own section
Yes.
that clarifies. And I like what you're saying, because I was thinking of some language that specifies infrequent repair or something that, like any of us would, help a buddy change brakes, like you were saying. Like, I don't think that should in any way fall under the category of, especially when there's no money being paid.
Yeah.
But I understand the reason that statement in there after you explained it, of it's to protect the integrity of the neighborhood, and I get that. So perhaps breaking it out is a good way to help protect that and not get anyone wrapped around the axle.
No pun intended.
I think that's intentional. I like that suggestion, though.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
And maybe you could tie it to a number of days, so like less than 5 days per year or something.
Well,
That way there is
I
a
know,
concrete enforceable measure.
That's
I
helpful.
know city code. You can't have a inoperable vehicle
Right.
sitting in your driveway.
Right.
Yep.
So if it matches that number of days, maybe this could work.
Yeah, but what if they have to order a part or something and it's coming from Timbuktu and they aren't going to get it for 10 days?
You move it to, and I don't know what the number of days is offhand, but you would move it to an enclosed garage.
Yeah, or if somebody's doing it as a business, they need to register. It's not just at that
Well,
point
I
it
mean,
becomes
as a
no longer.
friend, because that would include your friend. He's got to move that car.
Right,
So you've got the
well-
brakes off and the brake pads off. How are you going to move it?
Well, I understand. There's ways.
We push cars around.
There's dollies.
Yeah.
There's specific
With no
dollies
tires?
for it,
I
but-
think so.
Yeah, I like breaking it down though. I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll give it its own section. We'll make a provision for occasional use and try to tie it to some sort of number of days.
I mean, I don't know what the city code is exactly on inoperable cars sitting in the driveway.
Right. Yeah.
Something like 48 hours?
Yeah,
That's
24 or 48, I think.
48.
48.
I mean, most
Maybe
of
we
the time,
should look
based
at
on
that next.
based on the parts store.
You got an inoperable car, do you, Joe?
I don't. But I could foresee that situation where you've got something apart and you're ordering it from your online retailer and it takes 5 days to get here.
You want to leave it.
And if that happens once a year, then you're probably not going to get a lot of
Well, and
complaints.
as long as you don't have it sitting on blocks for 5 days, it's not going to be an eyesore. I mean, if it's just an internal part and just sitting, if I go on vacation, my car sits in the driveway for 5 days, it doesn't move, it doesn't mean it's, and I don't think any of my neighbors are going to call me in for having an inoperable car, but if you have, part of it I think is part of it slightly. If you have the entire thing torn down to frame and have the pieces laying all over the yard, I think that's a different situation than having a car that maybe you're just waiting on a part. So
You might get up the next morning and have parts.
nobody's going to call for a car just sitting there.
But I think it is important to make sure that the law reflects the way that we want it to, not just relying on the fact that we may not enforce it or it may not be enforceable, which just kind of hides the problem with the law.
Yeah.
The other question I had in this is in both D and E, you have them renewing these licenses annually, and I thought current ordinance was every other year.
That was a combination of cleaning up some of the confusion with that, because it really was just, it didn't make sense with the way the business ordinance is written. So right now, if you own a business, this just applies to the zoning regulation for home-based businesses. But in Chapter 3 of the code, if you own a business, you have to register that business every year. So it was like, you have to register that business, but unless it's a home-based business, then you have to register every other year. And oh, by the way, your conditional use permit gets reviewed every whatever
So
cycle that
you're
is.
just trying to be consistent
Yes.
with it all. Okay, but does this require this person under conditional use to go back out every year and re-advise all the neighbors of the
No.
business?
No.
How often does that process
No.
need to happen?
So the conditional use, I need to just review it really quickly, but we did try to address that. Conditional use registration requirements. So they have to pay the conditional use fees that very first year, and then they pay, once they're approved, they pay the permit to operate. And then they pay every year in accordance with the business license.
Just the permit?
Yes.
They don't have to go and do the
No,
the
they don't.
notification
They
of all
don't.
the neighbors?
They don't. Now, something I can't change is that the planning commission could recommend that their conditional use permit be reviewed every other year. And that would
So
still.
that would be something that they would say specifically to this particular
Yes,
business?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
But otherwise, assuming that planning commission doesn't say anything like
They
that,
pay their business license.
they would not have to notify their neighbors every year?
Correct.
Would they ever have to notify their neighbors again after the first initial application?
Possibly. If it's something that planning commission, if the business changes or evolves.
Well, that's,
I know we had.
changes are bad, yeah.
Yeah, I think if the zoning administrator saw that business had changed and called in, I guess, reminded planning commission that they had a right or duty to review, they could, and the business had dynamically changed, the planning commission could ask them to re-notify everybody.
You're right. Yeah, I can see where that makes sense.
But that would seem to be
because
rare.
they've changed the business.
Right.
They're not doing something.
Right.
Okay, that's good. I can't vote on it anyway, but it's all right.
I think the one thing I wanted to point out, the planning commission settled on a $35 registration fee. They went back and forth over that too. But $35 seemed to be right in the middle.
Any other questions on that?
I guess I'd like to follow up on the issue of the home gunsmithing business. I don't think we got settled on exactly where that lands in here, right? I think we left that unfinished.
Well, this is the next thing I was going to bring up, and it relates to that. I think the reason we're unclear on that is because the way that this is worded is it's as determined by the police chief or city zoning administrator. And so there's a component of subjectivity there that relies on the discretion of the police chief and city zoning administrator. And so the way I'm understanding it is based on how it's written, we would have to ask them their opinion on that business, and they would determine which process it falls in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
So I would actually maybe be interested in entertaining any thoughts on how that could be made more objective.
Okay, so first of all, I have a thought directly on that. The reason given that Jackie mentioned was as to why it would fall under Tier 3. That is why the gunsmithing business would fall under Tier 3 is because of concerns over ammunition or weapons stored. And I don't think that's a reasonable reason for qualifying under. First of all, I think it's arbitrary. I think it isn't. This falls into that. It's too subjective, and I think the strongest argument was what Mr. Mayor brought up, and that was traffic. I think the home-based gunsmithing business, the nature of what that business is, I can't imagine that they don't have customer base that would drive to there, drop off a firearm, and
But it's not every day. It's not, you don't have to be
it's
on there for
it's
a storefront.
infrequent, but I could see that as a traffic. If we're talking about what are these conditions.
I don't see it any more than a daycare person dropping off their kids every day.
Right, so my point is that I think that's the only reasonable reason I see for falling under Tier 3. I actually, my personal opinion is it seems to fall under Tier 2, not Tier 3. And the fact that the police chief could have concerns over weapon stores or ammunition, I don't think that's a legitimate reason here, and that would give me reason to entertain some more specific language guarding against that type of reasoning.
Now, I will say, I think that it's important to clarify these aren't weapons or ammunition owned by the homeowner. That's a very different kind of protected, highly protected space. Mm-hmm. This is ammunition and weapons not registered to the homeowner, registered to someone else. So that is more of a protection for the homeowner when police are coming into your home and you have weapons that belong to someone else or registered to someone else. You can disarm the situation a lot more quickly if that information is kind of known by law enforcement. I think that was the thought behind it. I think there's a very different protection for what you're talking about. I mean, no one has a right to know how much ammunition or weapons anyone has in their home. It's just when you derive business for it, the exchange and turnover could become an issue. And I think that's what the thought was. But if you think that belongs better in another section.
I'm not quite sure how I'd change it.
I think any business can be subjective, and that's why I think that having the purview of the code or the police chief and kind of discuss that, and then if somebody disagrees, I mean obviously they can go in front of the planning commission, come in front of us, or whatever they choose to at that point. But I think that gives some flexibility to and maybe the police chief thinks one way and the code inspector thinks the other way, and we can figure it out from there. But I think that does give a little bit of flexibility to as far as how things are determined.
Does this provide for an appeal process?
Let me think.
Without having to do the neighbor notification?
Yeah, so the way that I see an appeal process working, the zoning administrator reviews the application, denies the application. The person would then have a right, just in the public, you always have this right to petition planning commission for a hearing. And then that would get it on planning commission's radar, which would...
And they could overturn that and classify it as a tier 2? Without having to do...
If I'm going to say, I would say, I in my mind, that's how it works, and that's how I would drive it through, but that's something we can codify. The planning commission shall or may review, because we don't want to drive them through. We don't want them to go before planning commission and have to automatically fall under the conditional use permit, right. Which if we don't say that, then that could happen. And so
maybe actually any business that's determined, by the police chief or zoning administrator have one of those concerns, maybe that should automatically go to planning commission for consideration.
For the most part, for the most part, if you're getting considered for tier 3, you're in a business, and it shouldn't be a big deal to go notify neighbors anyway. I mean, it's the way it's been.
Right.
I mean, I guess I'm missing the point on why it's such a big deal.
Not the tier 3. It's if you've got the occasional gunsmithing business, would you want that to fall into the tier 2? Where you don't have to do all the neighbor notifications, or would you want that to have to fall into a tier 3 where you do have to do all of the neighbor notifications?
I mean, I guess
it is the determination.
I think that makes sense. If I could interject here, tier 2 to tier 3, that makes sense, but not tier 1 to tier 2. Because that's a lot of administrative.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But the guy that came for the antique gunning thing, he had to send out notification.
Yeah, he did.
Plus, it went to the planning commission. Okay, if planning commission would have turned it down, he could appeal, and then it comes back to the council.
Yes. But that's through the conditional use process, which by then he's already tied up in a expensive, costly process.
Well, yeah, but he could still appeal it, and then I think if he appeals and wins, he gets his money back. Or part of it refunded or something. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Whether it was all of it or part of it.
So he does have an appeal process.
Yeah.
In that
And
case.
it comes to the council, not back to the planning commission.
Right.
So to be clear, what we're suggesting here is that there be a way of appealing a decision by the police chief or zoning administrator that a tier 2 should be a tier 3.
Correct.
When the business owner thinks he should be a tier 2.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at.
Yes, exactly. I agree with you having some language for an appeal process. That's,
Hearing. Yes.
I
we
think
will.
that would satisfy my concern.
We will include that. It may not say appeal. It may say, have a right to be heard before planning commission, just because the appeal connotation creates a very different kind of.
Or maybe I might suggest should automatically be heard by planning commission, or will be on the planning commission agenda as a discussion topic, or something like that.
So whenever they make that determination, that goes before the planning commission.
Yeah.
Is it automatic?
But
I don't know, I'm just
if they
thinking about that.
deny him, where does the guy go? An
Just like
appeal,
always.
he doesn't appeal.
If the planning commission also says no, is that your
Yeah.
question?
If the planning commission says no, appeal, correct me if I'm wrong,
Then he has
means
to go-
that he has to go through a different board. The different board is the city council. He doesn't go back to the planning commission.
Right.
Yeah, we're okay.
Right.
He takes his
Absolutely.
papers
I
and
think we all agree.
everything to the planning commission.
Yep. I think we're all agreeing on that.
If they say no, he can appeal, but it comes back
To the city
to,
council.
yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm going to make sure that I'm not exactly clear on what you're agreeing to.
For the tier 3 process, if
Yes.
there is an appeal
Yes.
of the planning commission, that comes to the city council.
Yeah, that's codified. Yep.
Anything else? Questions or comments on this? Make those changes, update it, and
The mayor can't have a gun shop.
not selling anymore.
Doggone.
Hey, next we're going to talk about exotic animals. This, speaking of businesses, it's next two things here are kind of businesses too. This is a business that wants to expand here in Bel Aire and bring forth a couple of animals that we had basically policies that said they couldn't be here. You heard him, he did come and present at the last council meeting. I do want to point out that we asked, and Keith did do a kind of drop-in surprise inspection before this came up, just to, because I wanted to know if there was anything not on the up and up. And he reported back, matter of fact, that it was almost in better condition than what he thought, or he reported to Jackie, so I'm telling you the second hand, but absolutely no violations or anything were found there, that he was following the letter
Yeah.
to them. The way that I understand this is going to be, he wants to rent, or he's already renting the store front next door to this business, and wants to have a couple of these animals that we say we can't have, that would be there for display and educational purposes, not to sell, because we're not selling alligators or that here. Yeah.
Yep, and that's exactly, Mr. Mayor. I would only say that Keith is putting together that report, and just on the initial look, he doesn't see anything. He still needs to make sure he researches, and so there may be some, but his initial reaction were things were on the up and up. So, yeah, the red, we would just basically drop in a number 2, which describes exactly what would be allowed in this case. Basically, it has to be a pet store, so it has to earn a majority of its income from pet sales. We didn't want the hair salon or somebody else displaying these educational reptiles. And then they have to maintain insurance.
Yogurt and python.
Exactly. Exactly. Unless you would want that, then that's something we can change. But that's
Medusa look.
something. Insurance certifications and then security measures. Kind of what that outlines.
On the insurance, is there a specific quantity of the insurance that we should be thinking about requiring for that? You know, is a $20,000 liability policy enough, or does it need to be a $5 million liability policy? Just a thought I'm having there, question to consider.
That's something I'd have to ask an expert, because I mean, there's a point I would think where it gets cost prohibitive, but then there's a point where $20,000 is not enough to protect, you know, just the cost of replacing the animal. Then the victims or if something happened, it wouldn't mitigate any harm. So I can look into that. If you'd like to add a specific number here.
I'd like to have say a minimum amount of whatever.
Whatever Jurassic Park had.
Maybe,
Just kidding. Sorry.
you know, maybe it's $1 million liability or something like that. That's what they always say that tell us in aircraft.
And I don't know if we would put that in here or if we put that in another policy, because I wonder.
I mean, that's something we can even dictate how much they have to have.
You can.
I mean,
Go.
Is it part of what process?
yeah, for them to get the license, we're saying that they have to have a certain amount of coverage.
Because this isn't a separate or special license that we're granting here, right? This is if you have a
changing
business
the policy
that meets these requirements, then you can have.
He doesn't have to make any application. You just
Correct.
if we adopt this change, and this I guess is a change in ordinance.
Yes, this
If we
is would
adopt
be
this
the
change
ordinance.
in ordinance, then he can do this, right?
Yes. But if we specify if we specify the amount of insurance required here, again, I'm moving away from the fixed in ordinance and then adaptable policy. If we kind of come up with a policy after this that says, Keith, you have to require $20,000 to $100,000 based on the recommendation of some insurance company. I don't know. Maybe it'd be better to have that in a policy, unless you'd like to see it in the ordinance.
I just think it needs to be addressed. The legislative means by which we accomplish that. Okay with whatever's appropriate.
Yeah, I think
there.
Because we're not responsible if something happens.
Yeah, we think we need maybe a little research on, what does the zoo have? What does Tanganyika have? What does other places?
And also,
We need some idea of what.
Are we limiting the kinds of inherently dangerous animals? I mean, are we talking about king cobras being on display? Is there language limiting what kind of?
Well, isn't that right here? I mean, it's in the code.
I mean, it just says that pet store may display such inherently dangerous reptiles.
You mean you're not familiar with the Heliodurmidae?
Well,
What is it?
I don't know.
but I mean, it's basically this is basically saying that the code definition of inherently dangerous reptile, you're basically allowing any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So I mean,
Fang snake?
Yeah, so I think that's the point. Is they're looking to bring. I don't recall if it's an alligator or a crocodile. I think it was an alligator.
Alligator.
And also a venomous python to their store, but it wouldn't necessarily be limited to those animals. Once we make this change, they could have other things, and another pet store could open that also had that if we were to make this change.
So do we want to limit it just to those two so that...
I mean, if that's what they're thinking about bringing in, I mean, we could change it to just that, and then if they wanted to bring in something else, it would have to come back before City Council for us to approve. I think that might make more sense than just saying any of these inherently dangerous reptiles as defined, you're allowed to bring in now.
I think just let him bring in the alligator. He can eat you faster.
This is a change to the city code, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so I would hate to make the city code so specific that it could only apply to this one business in this one case. To me, that doesn't maybe necessarily feel like an appropriate
Well, I think
use
if
of the
another
city
pet
code.
store would come in, I mean, it's
applied to them too.
I mean,
Well, we have a category. I mean, the category is inherently dangerous reptile. That is what is defined here.
And that's what's.
I
don't think it's a good idea to break that down into some specific two animals.
Well, my
think it's-
question, then my question becomes then, what's to stop him from bringing in 50
Nothing.
of these? I mean,
That's
Capacity and storage
Yeah, I
and
mean, you're talking
insurance
about-
requirements.
Well,
He can
okay, the
rent
reasonable. I mean,
next place
there's guidelines here, and there's.
I mean, I don't think it's too big of a deal, though.
Our
to-
requirements are insurance, certification, security measures. I mean, those. I mean, in my mind, the way this is currently written, what we're adding here are requirements that they have to meet. That even if they did bring in 50, they can't just put them all in a room and have them loose. That's not what we're talking about.
I mean, the
They're
way this
contained in a way
reads,
that's-
as long as they're contained and deemed safe, they can make this look like the floor where Indiana Jones had to jump down.
Yeah.
Stinks.
As long as if it's safe, isn't that cool?
Huh?
I mean, the point is, if it's safe and there's containment measures and security measures, and that the provision.
The thing is,
maybe this isn't specific
the more
enough.
chaos
but-
you get with things, the more things that can go wrong and potentially be a danger to people.
Would you be in favor of just adding a limit to the number of them that you could have for a given pet store? Say, for example, up to a total of 10 or up to a total of 5 or up to a total of 50, so that we're not looking at something that's just
That's
to
the one
strike
pet store,
ridiculous
that's
out of the
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I don't know that it is ridiculous to say if they're wanting to bring in these specific animals for educational purposes. It takes one council meeting to really go, and they come to us with a proposal, and they want to bring in a different animal that's on this list. To go, okay, that we can add that, and it's a one and done council meeting to add that. I don't think that's too much to ask.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a reasonable. I'm totally open to limiting it to a number and less than 50.
49
That would alleviate your. That seems reasonable
What
to me to
happens
limit the number.
if he rents this office space next door to him, and then 2 months down the road he rents the next space because both of those are empty?
I think that's
So,
awesome. That's
more
great
tax
for
dollars
Bel
to
Aire.
Okay, but here's a
So
counterpoint.
wait a minute, I'm not finished.
Sorry.
So if he puts an alligator in the first one, does that mean he can put an alligator in the second one? Because they're separate rooms.
And there are state laws too that come into play. I mean,
Right.
where it's under the zoo and aquariums, you have to have so much space.
Yes.
The animal
For
has
each
to be able to turn around
Right.
completely. I mean, you can't just.
Right, and that governs what they
Yeah.
do. If they're truly doing it for educational purposes, they're not going to have like 50 snakes just
Right.
entangled in there. They can't. The Department of Agriculture won't give them a
He'd
license.
probably have them hanging from trees.
But I think the best case scenario is this business experiences some rapid growth.
And expands.
They outgrow their space, and they need to come buy some of our land and build their own building, and it goes right out here in front as a feature, and that's the best version of this.
45th and Woodlawn.
Yeah. No, not 45th. 40. He was going to build right over there at 45th and Rock.
Okay, now I don't think any of us have exhaustively researched every one of these reptile families that are listed here, but we have the general headings of what they are. They're venomous, rear-fanged snake, boas and pythons, and crocodilia.
I wouldn't
So,
feed them.
okay, so let's just. So, I mean, I don't think our decision is required exhaustive research of what all this is, but I don't know, maybe one of these or two of these or a few of these are very tiny, and it's quite easy to have like 10 of them in some little tiny thing. I think that's also a consideration that if we limit with a specific number, are we also also considering the possibility that maybe it's perfectly reasonable. I mean, I don't know. One of these could be just tiny, where in a small case you could have 10 of them, or
Okay,
But they grow.
If
maybe.
you're only
I don't know.
displaying them, what is the point of having 10? Is there a point of having 10?
I don't know.
I mean, are they pack animals? Do they thrive better in a pack? I mean, I don't know this, but I'm thinking if they're just for display, that there's no need to have
Right.
10 of one species. I mean,
There's fish species that, like, having one is kind of lame, but you got like 20 of them in a tank and they all live together and are happy. Just saying,
I think the
I just want to
cost,
consider all aspects here.
the amount of money,
Which
I
they
think
have
the first bullet, earns 50% or more of its income from the sale of pets, pet food, or pet supplies. That kind of creates a natural market incentive to use your space to actually
Sell stuff.
And so I think that kind of controls how much space you'll actually use to display. I mean, if they turn into a nonprofit, everyone coming in just to look at animals, if over 60% of the space is taken up with display animals that you can't sell, I wonder if that helps. In my thoughts, that helped kind of limit kind of the most outrageous.
You could increase that it would have a more limiting effect. Just instead of listing a number of animals, you could say something higher than 50%.
Mm-hmm. Or you can say the store space. Or I don't know if you want to control their business in that way, but if you say the amount of square footage dedicated to displaying animals be limited to some.
My thoughts on this kind of thing is to give as much freedom as possible to the business owner. Our job is not to get into the nitty-gritty on that. Our job is to create, first of all, it's safety, right? Public safety is what we're concerned with here. If we have guidelines that maintain a reasonable level of, security and safety and following, best practices for this type of business, I don't want to impose arbitrary numbers and percentages if we don't have to.
I agree with this sentiment.
Thanks to our social media and YouTube, Darian with Exotic Pets commented they currently have a $2 million liability policy. And they want to bring 3 new animals in, which they want to have on display. One would be an American alligator, a reticulated python, and a Gila monster. Cool. That's what they want.
Sounds cool.
Yeah. So if you want to put a dollar amount, it'd be a $2 million policy. Sounds like that's what they have.
Standard.
The standard.
Yeah, I just think for future uses and other businesses that might come take advantage of this, it's appropriate to have some sort of minimum there. I don't know what that minimum should be, but
Has anybody here been into the store?
Yes, I have.
They've got
It's
them
amazing.
behind and they're locked, and it's cool, and
It's Jurassic Park.
Yeah, what's that?
It's Jurassic Park.
That was too successful.
There's just a lot of different.
The things in there are not things I would necessarily want as a pet, but I'll share a story. It was a week or two ago. I'm going to tell a granddaughter story. I was going to. She got a little thing out of a toy from a Happy Meal or something, and I said, "Well, let's go and look." And I thought it was I can't even remember, a salamander or something like that. And I said, "Let's see one." And the young lady there said, "Well, actually, that is a chameleon," and got down, on the floor with my almost 5-year-old granddaughter, told her what a little chameleon was, and actually got one out.
Now she wants one.
Yes, she does. It was an educational thing, and I've been in there, I think 3 different times now, and there's always people in there shopping. So this is a niche market that I think is doing well. It's obviously doing well. The fact that they want to expand, not even a year later, this is exciting.
yeah, I went in there on Saturday and I was impressed with the store.
It's clean. And
Learned a little bit while I was in there. Got a little bit more comfortable with reptiles than I've been in the past. Still uncomfortable, but when he was in here talking, he talked about that's part of what they try to do is to do that education, and I think it's good.
Well, we could have him bring babies.
No.
No.
I'll leave the room.
One of my really only concern about any of this is just the safety. Okay, you bring these animals. They're classified this because there are inherent risks to these animals to public safety, and and I told the gentleman when he called me on the phone one time, I said, I want to see what precautions there are for catastrophic events. I mean, a fire or a hurricane or tornado. We don't get too many hurricanes up here. We do get them, but they're usually die. They're just tropical storms by the time they get this far north. But a tornado or anything like that, and what protections are there to keep those animals from getting out and getting loose? Because once they're loose, and we do have a lot of bodies of water here. Alligators like those bodies of water, and I don't know if they'd survive or not survive. But
I'd say most of those animals I doubt would survive.
There'll be a period of time that they will be alive. Okay, loose, and I want some sense of confidence that can't happen, even in those catastrophic events. Because I can just envision if we would have something of those catastrophic events, they'll be after, the citizens will be after us for allowing this to happen. Okay.
I agree with that concern, and safety being my only concern too. To add to that, the one thing from a safety perspective that I was trying to think through is when the gentleman came and was talking about the animals and the containment measures they have in place. There's the primary one, which is the cage that they're in, and then the secondary one is actually the store. The thing that I was thinking about there is, given that the store is part of a building that's attached to other stores, are there measures in place that are designed to that building that would prevent the animals from going from one portion of the building to another portion of the building that's not the animal store? So could one of the reptiles get through a heating duct or through a ceiling tile get into the other building? And I don't know how the building's designed that they're in, but I think if you're
that they can be.
I think that if you're relying on the building as the secondary containment, then there need to be some precautions there, because you hear the occasional story of maybe the snake that gets loose in the apartment building and ends up in somebody else's apartment through those types of measures, and from a safety perspective, that's a concern that I have.
Mm-hmm. What about the snake that got wrapped around the woman's mailbox that got a couple 3 weeks ago in Wichita? The python.
I get snakes in my basement every once in a while, but I just pick them up, take them to the lake. But, but they're just little garden snakes,
Sounds like what I'm hearing from your discussion is that I'm going to brief up maintaining security measures. I'm going to beef up that paragraph to address including a catastrophic event plan and to include measures to address secondary confinement.
I think containment is the word you need to use.
Yeah, secondary containment.
Yeah,
maybe
just making the
ventilation.
building secondary containment might not be adequate. The commercial building, there's too many ways to get around that. Over a wall, you don't see the top of the wall because it's covered by the ceiling tiles, but above those ceiling tiles is another way around.
The walls.
Yeah.
I think the concern with that, I think if they address like the ventilation vents by putting that grating up or certain things like that, I think that's a reasonable kind of mitigation they could take. If they're going to put something to kind of act as another container, that could get cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
So. Is our the language you're talking about have phraseology that's talking about can demonstrate this, or what is it?
Yeah,
we're
so
looking
it
at?
would be that basically that they would maintain a list of security measures that would address a catastrophic event plan. So they would have one that they would maintain. We would not be responsible for overseeing that. And then they would address security measures, including, I'm just going to say, ventilation escape and other escape routes for their secondary containment measures.
What about as far as the city verifying the ability of these, or you know what I mean? I mean, trust but verify here, right? I mean, how do we quantify that these containment measures are actually what they're maybe are claiming to be?
We currently require or allow the building inspector to go through and do his property maintenance inspection in any building. So he would use that with whatever they turn in when they submit their business license.
Okay.
When they're getting certified by the State Department of Agriculture, do they check this as well as far as containment? And, I mean, is that something that...
I know that I don't know exactly what they check. I do know that the Department of Agriculture does require like the vaccination of the animals and then the containment size and whatnot. I don't know what they actually check.
It might make sense that a lot of that's covered by that policy, but
From what I understand, their requirements are stringent. But
Yeah,
I don't know
I mean, I
whether
figured-
that's
I figured
stringent
it
for
would be.
animal welfare or stringent for what you're concerned about, which
I
is
cannot imagine what their
I would guess both. I would guess both.
I would guess both. But I think I think it really makes sense to have a catastrophic event plan. That's something that Bel Aire cares about as far as our emergency management responsibilities. So.
And I'd like to point out, this store has been in business for several months now. It was the lead story, front page of the Bel Aire Breeze. They came and made a presentation at a council meeting. Spring Roll, the Chinese restaurant, E-Drop, Subway, the AAA insurance. I have not had one complaint, not one phone call, not one, oh my God, what are you doing calls.
and previously I believe they were in business in Towanda,
Right.
and so they've been in business for a while and previously had these animals, I think, at their store there, and so they've got a history of demonstrating that they can manage these animals, I think.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm not against it. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate of it as far as protecting yourselves for, another pet store trying to come in and going, hey, you're letting them do that. It's already in your code. We're going to do that too. And, not demonstrating the same, because, it only takes one thing to happen to kind of ruin it for everybody. So, I just want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves for future wise too.
I think the other good thing in this specific case too is, I feel like the manager of the store has the appropriate credentials for working with these types of animals. He talked about that when he was here, and so I don't know if that might also be something in this section that we want to specify, is that the person responsible for the animals has appropriate credentials for working with them.
You want to specify, because there's a store owner and then there's a store manager. There can be different individuals.
Right. Right.
And when the one that talked to us, wasn't he the store manager?
Yes.
Yes. Daniel Moore.
Yeah, I
Need
think
a
that
haircut.
I think it should be employee on staff.
Or maybe the person responsible for directing the care of
Yes.
the animals.
Directing the care.
Yeah.
Clean that up when I.
Another thing that I don't know, maybe this isn't a part of this, but I just, in thinking about this, would adopting this policy require any sort of consideration for law enforcement as far as special training or some sort of consideration for, well, worst case scenario here, the alligator gets out, and do they have a plan to deal with that? Because that is a possibility. I don't think it necessarily works into what we're talking about here, but maybe it's a future item, or I just throwing that out there. We haven't talked about that, but probably prudent to do something.
Is the alligator tagged at all, like with like a chip, like we tracked?
That's
type
what
thing?
I'm thinking. Their catastrophic plan will require animal tagging so they can be responsible for that. I don't know if they tag their animals or not, or if they're required to.
GPS.
Take it up to the Humane Society, have it scanned.
We've seen Jurassic World. It
Call me
doesn't
the
work out so
alligators.
Couldn't you see somebody walking in
You
there
talk
with
about that,
Dr. Burroughs?
Yeah.
Even with Keith and I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to need to consult. I mean, Keith will need to consult with experts on whether this falls into this category or what animal this is. So yeah, there is some expertise required, a different expertise required than for police.
So is this going to be ready? I'm sorry.
I got an update
Oh, boy.
on YouTube. Regarding safety, the state of Kansas does an inspection at least once a year for the safety and health of the animals. They also require a form that shows what is done during a natural disaster. None of the animals would survive during the winter. Let's see.
What's that?
They do have all 3 spaces at Bell Point currently, and they have a firewall. So if something were to get out, it would have to escape through either the front or the back door. And they do have a
Goes up to
catastrophic event plan with the state for blizzards, fires, tornado, etc. And the state also checks for security and containment.
Everything I've heard from Exotic Pets, they're on the ball with all of this stuff. My concerns aren't necessarily, this specific case. It's just setting up the process so that, if there's a competitor that were to come to Bel Aire, that they would, also be as diligent and be as on the ball as these guys are.
So if we're comfortable putting this on our next agenda with these suggestions that you've had, I mean, we can certainly, I would encourage, obviously he's listening, or I can call him, or we'll invite him to maybe be here for the next meeting. That way, if we were to have any additional questions, we could ask him from the bench. I think that would be a prudent thing.
Yeah.
But please don't ask him to bring in.
No.
No show and tells.
No show and tell. So, but that's my recommendation at this point.
Did you want to include anything on limiting the number?
Yeah.
Because I think it's easier to do it now. Like what Jeff's saying, if you got somebody else coming in, it's harder to go say, well, wait a minute, we only want to do 2 now, and everybody else is doing 5 or something like that. I mean, it's easier to...
What if we do total weight?
Purpose of this is for educational, and it says that in here, if I remember right. Educational purposes. I think it's very appropriate to say limit the number of a particular species to 1 or 2 or something like that.
For educational purposes only.
Because it's for educational purposes.
So, I mean, yeah, and the fact that if he, I mean, I think it'd be great if they did expand, but if they're going to go through that process, I think it's not too, I mean, if they have to do some work in the store anyway, it wouldn't be too big of a deal to come and say, hey, we're expanding, we'd like to add, 5 new animals, or, whatever the case may be, and we can go, okay. It's as easy as, like I said, a council meeting and changing the code to stipify that.
How many babies does an alligator have? Just hope that when they
Well,
born
there's
it,
only
it's not
one there, and
pregnant.
he or she is not breeding.
Yeah, they said that about Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park. Those dinosaurs.
That whole place is inspired by Jurassic Park.
Oh, Lord.
Jackie, would it be possible or appropriate if we are going to specify a limit like that to specify that in a separate policy that the ordinance references, so that if we need to update it, we're not updating our ordinances, we're just updating the policy?
We can do it that way. I guess the display shall be limited to, if you do, let me just think about this. Because the business owner is going to come and look at this. We can say here, display may be limited by the city, and then we can reference a policy and limit it that way. That way the reader of this section of the ordinance knows that there could be some limitations set somewhere else.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah. Otherwise, you just do it all here. I mean, either way.
Do you have a preference?
I think I always like to not go back and have like a lot of versions of the code, so I do like the ability to limit it through policy.
Yeah, I like it.
They said that they would have they would never have more than 5 of any species.
Yeah.
5 of any species, so does that mean they would have
Of the
5
species
different
listed.
kinds? Oh, of those species, so
Not
no
five
more than
species.
5 kinds at a time type deal.
Well, I mean, whatever they like, they wanted to. Well,
I mean, they wouldn't have 5 alligators, 5
Yeah, they never have more than that.
snakes, 5 pythons, 5 boas. I mean,
5 of any species.
Okay.
That's something in the edge
Yep.
policy.
Okay. All righty, this is exciting.
Are they all in the same cage? Or box? Whatever.
I don't think so.
All right, I can't wait to see the alligator.
You look.
All right, now Steve, all right. I'm going to move on to cell tower, which is our final item this evening. We have a cell tower company that's looking at land within our city limits, and we've had some recent changes to legislation. I'm not going to go into history, but in 2015, a cell tower company wanted to come here, and it didn't happen, and there was a lawsuit, and I think it's ridiculous. But anyway, so the code is extremely detailed and restrictive that the council at that time came up with. So I think it's a good idea that we need to simplify the requirements. And this kind of goes back to what we've talked about. What's been the theme of this workshop is we want to be a business-friendly city and not have so many requirements and so many restrictions and everything. The other thing, too, is that there's a FCC ruling next month where we have to be in compliance with this FCC ruling by the end of the next month. So Jackie's gone through here. There's just a couple, basically some striking and rewriting. But I mean, dear God, this is a lot for a flipping cell tower. But
The companies looking to come in here, they're just wanting to put in cell towers. They're not wanting to put in some other type of business someplace,
right, this is a tower, not a store.
right?
Right.
That's why I just want to make sure we're talking on the same page. Yeah.
And they're wanting, from what we understand, they're wanting to put in an antenna on our water tower, so it's even less intrusive.
Oh,
Yeah, but don't we get paid for that?
City would receive revenue, yes.
Good.
Yes.
all $20 a month.
Yeah. Which I think that was part of the issues in 20%. We weren't going to get that. So it was.
So are we discussing 2 different topics here then?
No, just, bringing these codes, simplifying them so that we're in compliance with the federal regulations and so that we're not out of compliance, which we will be by May 1.
Right. It's sometime in April. It's a specific day.
so this basically the way it's written now with the additional red and then the red being stricken, that puts us into compliance.
Yes.
Is there anything else that really needs to be addressed besides being in compliance?
So this wouldn't have come to a workshop, but for the fact that this, like Mayor said already, this is restrictive. It's way more than a lot of other cities you're competing against are asking for as far as the detail and how you have to review an engineer's work. I mean, it's a lot. And so, getting in compliance with that, the red line does allow us to get into compliance, but there's some yellow highlighting that,
I guess I didn't flip them.
now, I think it's around.
Oh, hello.
I apologize for not, it's on page 8.
It's towards the back, yeah.
But I think that
I didn't flip that far.
you have the healthy tension between getting in compliance and attracting the business so that way the 5G companies can sweep the nation, but then also wanting to preserve aesthetics and looks in Bel Aire. And so you set standards that restrict what cell companies can do by to preserve how things look in Bel Aire. So I went through these with kind of getting us in compliance and kind of trying to preserve the way things look now, which is there are not a lot of independent towers or lattice towers, those old-fashioned towers. But I thought sometime in the future we may want to look at thinning the whole cell tower section of the code and making it a simple, like maybe 15-step process, if that's what the city wants. Understanding there's a lot of history here.
Jackie, is there a subsection in here that addresses the antennas on the water tower specifically?
Yes, there are sections that address how antennas can be put up on
They
existing
can't
buildings,
exceed
features,
more than
towers.
36 inches above the tower. See on,
Yeah.
not page number. Sorry.
There are no page numbers. Sorry.
For section 17,
Well, I guess just in general, I'm not in favor of putting cell antennas or antennas on the water tower. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, I think you kind of increase the vulnerability just from a standpoint of infrastructure vulnerability to terrorism or, attack or whatever. I think having the antennas and the water tower combined just becomes a bigger target for people that want to cause us problems, potentially. That's one issue. Second issue is when I drive into a city and I see antennas on the water tower, I immediately think, that city's too cheap to build this proper cell tower, and it looks terrible. I think especially when you see them, like, there's water towers even around the area that have antennas just all over the place, and it looks terrible, and it just, cell towers are built for that, and, obviously, a city looks at that and says, oh, we can make a little bit of money doing that, and yeah, that might be true, but what are you losing? There's something nice about seeing the water tower silhouette for the city. Our water towers are nice looking shaped objects that, when I'm driving in from El Dorado on 254 after coming from, Kansas City or whatever, I always look for that Bel Aire water tower that's not a Bel Aire water tower, and then the real Bel Aire water tower. I mean,
And the real.
I don't know. I think adding cell antennas on top of that, it'll lose that aesthetic, and it's not just that, but I mean, those are the kind of reasons against it. I'm not. That's just my thoughts on that. I'm not a big fan of that.
is that the interest of this company, is wanting to put it on the water tower? Or is that
Yes.
some way that was directed to them?
Yes, they want to put it on the water tower.
They came in with that proposal.
Right.
Hey, you do know that there is antennas on the old blue tower. The water tower over there.
Yeah, but we're going to start stacking cell. I mean, the cell antennas are a little bit
And
different.
all these antennas now, if they adopt this thing, they have to be camouflaged.
Well, it's
I don't know if that means like a bird or
It's not gonna be
a
invisible.
tree. Yeah, I understand that. We make
Like
what?
pterodactyl or something.
$800 a month off of these towers over there?
Yeah, something like that. And I think that's from the city standpoint, the two reasons for the water tower is one is the revenue piece. So, like Betty said, you can negotiate it to, I think we proposed like $1,500 a month for them. And that can help pay for the maintenance of the tower. The other thing is that the tower is there, and so it's not like you're putting in a separate the water tower's there, you're not putting in a separate tower. People are already used to the water tower sticking up 25, 30 feet, and you put another 10-foot antenna on it or something, it doesn't stand out as much as a particular cell tower. Those are kind of the thought process of why cities do cell tower or antennas on cell towers.
Plus, I think this city needs better cell coverage, especially as we're wanting to attract younger couples
absolutely does.
and younger families. I mean,
And that's why this needs to be simpler.
But I don't want a cell tower that looks like that one down behind the old KDOT building that's got them big bells on it. And I keep thinking, are they going to start playing jingle bells? Every time you go that way, that looks awful. And then there's one right down on the road.
I mean,
I saw some, I should have brought pictures because in researching this, there are some that, are they're called stealth towers. towers that they just look like light poles, and they look so discreet that in the right of way, we're going to have to allow, according to the FCC, we're going to have to allow the companies to come in and put their antennas in the right of way. It's just a matter of, do we let them attach to existing light poles?
I'm not too sure they're not going to make you allow to put it on water towers.
Exactly.
Right.
Do we allow them to, and then do we set guidelines that, restrict how they have to look?
Well, I don't
Could the
think
FCC really
36
address
inches.
that?
Yes,
Water
it does.
towers?
Yeah, the FCC has come in and said that we really can't restrict water
Right,
tower, or
right.
restrict cell towers at this point.
It's a national interest.
It kind of goes back to the LBJ administration with the great deal in Texas with the history I was reading about it with the electric wires, electric poles, and people were saying the exact same things then that we're saying now about cell towers. You don't even notice telephone poles or electric wires now. It's one of those, the times they are a-changing.
Yep.
So,
Just like your crocodile.
I'd say I noticed them, but they're kind of a necessary evil.
right. And especially if we want to continue to, like I said, attract young families. I mean, people aren't, landlines don't hardly exist anymore, so.
But I do appreciate and else
absolutely.
have comments on kind of the iconic nature
Yeah.
of the water towers and trying to protect that and the aesthetics there, because it is important to consider as well.
Yeah, and we can put, aesthetic requirements when we're working on the contracts,
They're a
just
lot
making sure
smaller
that they're
now and
as
shorter.
discreet as possible.
Than what they used to be,
just
the
to
big
make sure
towers.
that that's
36 inches is not that tall.
Yeah, 30, it's not,
I don't think you'll see it.
Well, and who knows what the 5G antennas will
Right.
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 They're getting even small, like I said, if
Getting
they
small.
paint
Or
it
they
gray,
get
it could
bigger,
just
I don't know.
fade right into the skyline, so, All right, so that'll be, or is there any other questions on that?
I do have just a kind of a trivia question. It referenced on 15 FAA, but there's no reference in here about the FCC. And I just wondered if that was a mistake, or I can understand why FAA might be
I did
interested in
notice that.
towers, but I would think this would be more. There is
Yeah,
a reference to
flying back close
FCC.
to other
I'm sorry,
issues.
there is reference to
Yeah.
FCC. But does the FAA have interest
Yes,
in this?
because of,
I think you have to
I think
because
in
of the
here-
height.
Right, the beacons.
in here, buried in the back of section 71013, which is, if you're looking from the back, 1, 2, the third page going forward from the back,
Okay.
it talks about the FAAs may require certain signage.
Okay.
That we would obviously have to allow their signage and requirements, but no one else's.
Okay.
So I think anytime you get into that height of flight space, the FAA cares.
Yeah, so like we have that issue over there at Jabara as you're heading north into the Sunflower Commerce Park. They have a flight pattern that's says the height and stuff. So a cell tower going over there would probably have to couldn't go if it was on 45th Street, couldn't go up past 25 foot or something because
Yeah,
of that
because
flight.
of that flight path. Right. Okay. That's just wanted to clarify. I was sure there was a good reason.
Well, good workshop tonight. Just real briefly, I've got a 3.5 hour drive ahead of me tonight, so I'm going to be really, really brief. But it's that time of year again to review the annual contracts of our city attorney and city manager. And it's something we do every year. What I would like to do, unless you guys tell me differently, is set up a time, and I've not spoken with them about this, but would be to set up a time where former council president Justin Smith and current council president Jeff Hawes and I can maybe meet for lunch and go over these and come up with them collectively for that. So would ask that what I thought the process might be, if each one of you guys want to fill a review out and submit it to me, and then the three of us would kind of meet and combine all those. You don't have to put your name on them, and if you want to, you can, but that would be my recommendation. I I've heard absolutely no complaints about either one of you two, so I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Oh, boy.
But this is something
I
that
did move out of Bel Aire.
he did, but he brought Reese's.
I can't eat Reese's. What good does that do me?
So that's
Bring some
my
bacon.
plan. Does anybody have
bacon, okay.
different ideas or different thoughts, or would like to see it done differently?
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay.
So, Ty, if you can get those mailed out to everybody, and
And my only question, maybe for the city attorney, on
No,
open
no,
meetings,
that's it right
if that is a
There,
concern there.
We can address, we can provide the proper notification for the public.
well, that's what I'm saying. Only meeting with two of them, I'm okay. That's okay, right? That's not an open meeting.
That's, it's
That's what
capped.
I.
I'd like to provide notice on that.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
just provide notice, because it
Absolutely.
depends on how the vote is on the certain topic that you're meeting on.
Okay.
It's not a quorum for that vote.
It's not a quorum, so he can meet.
We can provide notice.
I know the two of you both work east, so I can find the lunchtime and come over here and
Friday.
some Friday, but that works best.
Friday or weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, weekend would be even better.
Oh, yeah, I don't care.
All right.
Weekend's fine by me.
Mr. Mayor, before we adjourn, do we need to have an executive session, or can we?
We can't.
Oh,
Workshop.
Not the workshop.
Okay.
Is there a topic you wanted to discuss?
no, I was just curious.
Okay. You piqued my curiosity. No, executive session would have to be a special meeting. That would be called, and we have done that in the past. So, okay. Anybody else have anything else? Not, I'm gonna hit the road.
Okay.
Why do you have to go tonight?
Got a funeral in Ulysses tomorrow morning at 10.